The rancher slowly pulled his hat lower as the saloon quieted, the scrape of boots and clink of glasses fading beneath the weight of a single number, spoken too loudly to be taken back. $10,000 hung in the air like gun smoke. He felt it settle on his shoulders, heavier than drought, heavier than debt, heavier than the stares now fixed on him and the woman standing at his side. He did not look at her at first. He already knew what he would see: calm where others showed fear, stillness where others would have struck. Ilara stood straight back near the bar, her height alone enough to command space in a room that had never learned how to make room for her people. The lamplight caught the silver band at her wrist, worn smooth by years of work and weather. She did not dress for approval. She never had. Her presence was not an answer to the men watching her, but a question they were unprepared to face. The offer had come from railroad men with clean coats and dirty intentions. They spoke of curiosity, of verification, of a single night that would settle matters. Their smiles said ownership. Their tone said amusement. They believed money made all things simple. They believed marriage was a paper fence easily stepped over. They believed size and silence meant savagery, not restraint. The rancher finally turned to her, his jaw tight. He had fought storms and wolves and men with less honesty than these, but none of it prepared him for the moment when choice could not be hidden behind bravado. He did not speak for her. He had learned better than that. Ilara met his eyes, dark and steady. The room waited for anger, for spectacle, for refusal sharp enough to entertain. Instead, her voice carried level and clear, neither raised nor softened. She said no one owned her. Not land, not money, not a room full of men who mistook confidence for control. Then she said something else, something quieter, and far more dangerous. She said she chose. The rancher felt the truth of it land harder than the offer itself. Choice meant risk. Choice meant consequence. Choice meant trusting a bond, forged not in comfort, but in shared survival. He nodded once, not in agreement with the men, but in respect for the woman beside him. Around them, the saloon exhaled. Laughter returned, uneasy and thin. The railroad men smiled again, already counting victories they had not earned. Ilara did not smile back. She simply turned toward the door, her shadow stretching long across the floor, carrying with it the knowledge that the night ahead would cost more than money and reveal far more than anyone in that room was prepared to see. The mansion rose from the plains like a promise that had forgotten who it was made to. White stone, wide windows, iron gates polished to a shine that spoke of distance rather than welcome. Ilara stepped inside without hesitation, her stride unbroken by the way conversation thinned around her. The air smelled of cigar smoke, expensive soap, and the faint unease of men who believed themselves untouchable. She felt their eyes first at her height, then at her shoulders, then at the quiet confidence they could not measure. They offered her a chair that looked sturdy but was meant to make her appear larger than comfort allowed. She did not sit until she chose to. When she did, the chair did not protest. That too unsettled them. Questions came disguised as compliments. Curiosity wrapped in politeness, edged with mockery. How long had she been married? Where she had learned such flawless English? Whether ranch life suited someone like her, she answered what was worth answering, and let the rest fall into silence. Silence, she knew, made men reveal more than words. They spoke of her husband when they thought she was listening loosely, testing for cracks, for jealousy, for control. Ilara corrected them once calmly. When one implied she was a possession tied to land, her voice did not rise. It did not need to. The room shifted around that single sentence, as if furniture had been moved without warning. Dinner passed slowly. Crystal glasses clinked. Laughter bloomed too loud, then faded. One man leaned too close, emboldened by his own assumptions. Ilara turned her head just enough for him to see her eyes clearly. He stepped back without knowing why. As the hour grew late, she was shown a room prepared with excess. Silk sheets, oil lamps turned low, a door that locked from the outside as well as in. She noted everything: the windows, the distance to the courtyard, the guards who pretended not to watch. Beyond the walls, somewhere in the dark, her husband waited as agreed. Not pacing, not praying, simply present. That knowledge steadied her more than any weapon. She stood by the window long after the house settled, watching moonlight spill across stolen ground. She thought of her mother's stories, of nights spent listening rather than speaking, of endurance mistaken for submission. When footsteps passed her door, they did not stop. By morning, the men would claim they had learned what they came for. Ilara knew better. They had learned restraint exists where they expected weakness. They had learned that some alliances cannot be purchased. And though the night had cost her patience and watchfulness, it had given her something in return, the certainty that fear, once recognized, could be guided, and that was far more valuable than their money. Dawn arrived without ceremony, pale light spreading across the land as if nothing of value had been wagered in the night. The mansion gates opened early, quicker than expected, and the money followed soon after, sealed and silent, delivered with hands that avoided Ilara's eyes. No speeches were made, no jokes lingered. The men who had spoken so freely before now moved with a careful distance of those who had touched something they did not understand and preferred not to name. Ilara walked back into the open air alone. The gravel crunched beneath her boots, steady and grounding. At the edge of the property her husband waited, just as he had promised, rifle still slung, posture unchanged from the night before. He did not rush toward her. He did not ask questions that did not belong to him. He only searched her face, the way a man looks for weather signs rather than reassurance. "They're finished here," she said. He nodded once, the tension easing from his shoulders in a way words could not have managed. Together, they rode back toward the ranch as the sun climbed, the land revealing itself inch by inch. Fence posts, cattle trails, the low line of hills that had never betrayed them. The money sat heavy in the saddlebag, but neither of them touched it. By midday, word began to travel. The railroad men had withdrawn their claim, citing complications, miscalculations, a sudden change in interest. Papers were signed quickly, almost carelessly. Surveyors packed their tools. The invisible pressure that had hovered over the ranch for months lifted, leaving behind a quiet that felt earned rather than empty. That evening, Ilara and her husband sat on the porch as the heat bled out of the ground. The house behind them was small, worn, theirs. Crickets filled the space between thoughts. He broke the silence at last, not with gratitude or apology, but with honesty. He told her he had feared the cost would be too high, that some things once given could not be reclaimed. Ilara listened, then rested her forearms on her knees, gaze fixed on the darkening horizon. She told him that cost was not always loss, that some nights were endured, so mornings could be protected. That strength was not proven by refusal alone, but by knowing when standing firm meant standing still. When he reached for her hand, it was slow, deliberate, an offering rather than a claim. She accepted it the same way she accepted the land, the work, the future, with choice. The night that had been bought with money faded into rumor, then into nothing at all. What remained was harder to measure, a boundary drawn, an alliance affirmed, and a ranch that stood not because it was defended by force, but because it was guarded by two people who understood exactly what it was worth.